Happy Easter, everybody, and I'm so glad that you came to join us today at First Coast MCC in wonderful St. Augustine, Florida. I am coming to you from my home in Clearwater, Florida, the other side of the state, to present to you the message for today. And I'm going to start off my sermon this morning by telling you that it is the most wonderful time of the year. And just as a special treat for you all, I decided to kind of take a song and create its own lyrics. And here we go. It's the most wonderful time of the year, with the eggs that are hidden and chocolate that's eaten and pollen is here. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's the happiest season of spring. With the pastel that's born and the flowers are born, he is resurrecting. It's the happiest season of spring. There'll be children a-running, the eggs will be boiling, the lilies will be all abloom. They'll be eating and dancing and do some preparing to see no one here at the tomb. It's the most wonderful time of the year, where the bonnets are dressed and the disciples are blessed by the scoring of heads. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It is very true, y'all. Easter is my favorite holiday. Ever since I was a kid, I always felt there was something very special about that day. Probably because it was during my spring break, or I just love that Cadbury bunny every single holiday season, or it just signals that I heard my favorite church music with my grandma. I've always loved Easter. Well, this year it's obviously a little different. With a global pandemic that is taking center stage, a quarantine for basically the entire country, millions and millions of people are filing unemployment claims on a website in Florida that is outdated and useless, and of course, a polarizing election that has cast a pall on the year. Anyway, it is obvious that Easter takes on a different chord than years past. And yet, even despite these circumstances of 2020, we still look to a familiar story that happened 2,000 years ago to signal that faith and freedom will always cast out fear. And this year we have a lot to be afraid of, don't we? But the beautiful story of Easter reminds us that even though it comes around every year and that we can almost recite that story word for word, the sweetness and yet prophetic words still have a powerful effect for Jesus to showcase all the world that all the powers of death and all the powers of fear cannot defeat nor destroy the man who speaks truth to power, who speaks love to life, and gives justice for the forgotten no matter what circumstances take place. This story still proves to be the standard of Jesus, proving once and for all that Easter is indeed the most wonderful time of the year. So let's see what's inside this biblical Easter basket, so to speak. We see Mary, a disciple, but hardly one living in privilege, going to wash and anoint the body of Jesus on the third day of his burial. And have you ever wondered why the third day? Is there any significance to it? Well, of course there is. See, during that time period, the Jews during this time of antiquity believed that the body could not be washed and anointed for 3 days after death. For the belief that their spirit, their ruach, was still hovering around the body. Only after 3 days was the spirit fully gone and they are allowed to wash and prepare the body to go back to the ground. Mary was just doing what was custom and necessary. But as she approached the tomb, she noticed something weird. I've always wondered what internal dialogue existed in her head. Things like, well, who took my job away? Or, now what? Or, Jesus done sashayed away. Side note, I've always believed that Mary is the patron saint of drag queens because of her ability to connect with her passion, be unashamed about it, and be a trailblazer for a certain group of people and make it a calling. But I digress. But she approaches with that disciple that Jesus loved. Many scholars believe that to be John, because this is the only gospel where the only story of Mary takes place, and John just so happens to be a cameo appearance. But as she does, she recognizes someone right away as the gardener, probably because after 3 days, her assumption was that he probably gave off an odor, and he probably stank. Then comes a sweet exchange where you can easily hear the sadness and grief in her voice. "Tell me, sir, where they took my Lord's body, so I can go prepare and wash him." Only then, after the gardener calls her name, she recognizes him as Rabboni, or teacher. See, I believe that in that precious, sweet, sovereign, short moment, Mary moved from fear to freedom. Mary looked to Jesus as someone who freed her and gave her the ability to finally speak truth to power, to realize the best of all she is, and to step into her life with freedom and without the fear of being lesser than, but really stepping into her own moment and to show her and to show the world all of who she really is and all that Jesus has taught her how to be. She saw Jesus as freedom, and she missed it. When she recognized the missing body, she made an automatic assumption that her freedom was gone. All hope was lost, and that she had to live in fear again. That she had to live in hiding, not knowing where to turn. But the beautiful thing was that Jesus was there. So was her freedom. So was her justice. So was her inner strength. So was all that she is in this world. So was all of her authenticity and the very best that she offered to the world. So was her ability to look back in her life and to live it without fear and being afraid. As she finally recognized Jesus, she knew him, and she finally knew herself as well. I believe that she got to know herself again by meeting Jesus for the second time in her life. I think just like Mary, I think over these last few weeks, Americans are beginning to fully see who we really are and what we are really made of. As we lock ourselves in quarantine from a fear of catching a disease that has no cure, has no discrimination, has no way to be stopped, we find ourselves living a 21st century message of moving from fear to freedom. It is very obvious that we have been shaken to our core. We are living in a time period that obviously is going to build fear, anxiety, and hopelessness. But yet I believe our passage this morning points to a resurrected Jesus that moves us toward freedom, moves us toward hopefulness, moves us toward a peace that says we can and we will get through this. If not just through me, but through the community we love and we hold too close. As a teacher at my school in Tampa, it is very clear that one of the messages that that resounds consistently is the message that we miss our students. We miss seeing their faces. We miss hearing their voices. We miss all the annoying and the habitual quirks that they may have. And so as a solace, we call each other. We talk to each other on the phone. We Zoom. We FaceTime with each other. Just to let each other know that we're still here and we still care for them. And that we still care for us. My husband and my dog are still here now in my home, and I'm sure that there have been times that I have gotten on their last nerve. It's very true. I've seen it on both of their faces. But to know that at the end of the day that we are still in this, that we are in this together, that we are not going away, and that sure, we can live under quarantine afraid of what's out there. Or we can put on our masks that we clothe with ourselves. We can put on our plastic gloves, and we can still continue moving forward knowing that we are going to be free. And this virus, this quarantine is not going to scare us. And even though it may not go away, neither are we. First Coast MCC, you've been through some trenches this year. And you're not going away either. If anything talks to us about the idea and the power of resurrection, it is certainly an Easter message that we have been told for 2,000 years. After losing a pastor, looking at new places of ministry and opportunity, I can understand that the fear is going to set in. The last time I was here, many of you commented on various changes that were taking hold within your church or community. I know that this builds in fear, anxiety, a sense of loss, and despair. But I believe our message this morning points to a resurrected Jesus who is still calling our name as sweet and softly as he did Mary's 2,000 years ago. And that he still provides us a new way. A way that says that because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. So friends of First Coast MCC, and those of you that are watching around St. Augustine area, and probably some of you who are watching on Facebook on Sunday morning as I put this on Facebook, my encouragement to you this morning is to keep moving forward on this Easter morning. Keep holding on to the freedom that Jesus has given you as he wipes your fear away. And know that as you move into that freedom, Jesus will always be there, pushing you forward to new life, new hope, and new greatness. Blessings be upon you. Happy Easter, and amen.